discussion on the digital platform, it's fairly new. 3 years ago, wasn't this prominent in the antitrust discussion. Is there a sense that the academic research, legal or economic or any other research is lagging behind at this point? Take them time to catch up, and maybe we should be cautious until we increase our knowledge, cautious with actually drastic policies.
I think there is a lot more capacity in the system and adaptability than perhaps we've suggested here. The U.S. system has a lot of powerful, scalable features, and Gail pointed to an effort that's been going on for decades to make adjustments and adapt, and in many ways very successfully. But if you wanted to think about adaptation using a very basic test, you have to go to the Congress for new legislation right now. That's really tough. That's fraught with difficulty. Maybe you get a coalition to do it, maybe you don't. So what could you do right now without doing those kinds of things? The FTC's mandate is extraordinarily scalable, and in many ways it's a US mandate only. The cramping that that Spencer was referring to before about how you didn't know his real name is Stewart, did you? Oh, I told you. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. That's right. It's the Spencer Waller Chair for Stewart Weber Waller. Yeah. The FTC's mandate is there. It has the capacity. The Supreme Court's phobia. We heard about the Chicago obsession today. It's the Harvard School that gave us lots of these cramping doctrines with respect to private rights of action. It was the Harvard School that said it's a menace. It's Phil Arita that did this. It wasn't Bork. Antitrust paradox doesn't talk about private rights of action at all. It's Bork that did it. So either you change their minds about that, and I think that's hardwired, or you have a government-only cause of action that's developed by the government. That's going to be hard to do. When's the last time the FTC won a Section 2 case or like case in front of the Supreme Court? That would be never. So maybe in this century, its second century, it will happen. It didn't happen in the first. It hasn't happened yet. You would need a conscious effort, strategy, business management to sit down, even with, God forbid, the Department of Justice, to think about what you want to do and say, what is the existing map? Where do we want to move doctrine out? And how do we want to do it? And if you did that, I think there's a lot of flexibility to use the tools that you have right now to make these kinds of adjustments. And Gail described ways in which arguably that's already happening.
We saw Neil Gandel yesterday, Professor Neil Gandel showed us all his maps, and he said, there's so much data, so much information, so many papers, we're soon going to have all the answers. Just wait a bit. He didn't give us all the answers, but
not soon that we have all the answers, but maybe we could use them.
When you do have the answers, maybe you can make better decisions.
Antitrust agencies have, and especially in the US because they're so old, they've had so many repetitions, there's a thing called big antitrust data. It's about enforcement experience and knowledge. It's inside, but you have to do, of all things, you have to assimilate it. You have to study it. You have to reflect upon it. Then you can apply it. I would say in many ways it's there, but it's not going to happen by accident.
Just to borrow one of my favorite Bill Kovacic lines, working at the Federal Trade Commission is like tending a fruit orchard. You plant trees, they don't blossom, they don't bear fruit till long after you leave. But I've been there for 6 months. I'm enjoying the fruit planted by my predecessors. One of them I want to mention in response to something you just mentioned. The Federal Trade Commission doesn't show up at the Supreme Court very often, but we did very recently win, not a victory in the Supreme Court. We won a remand on the Supreme Court in a case involving a healthcare conduct a case called Activists. We didn't win on the case. As I said, we got a remand, but we changed the law for the better.
Thanks. There are more and more theoretical papers out there and models, which are extremely important, and they, of course, set the basis for this. But I think that we are missing here something really important. And this is the data. the data about how actually consumers behave or how these markets actually behave. So, for example, for one of my papers, I needed information about economies of scale in search. So how many searches do you need for your algorithms to actually be able to compete? A relevant question, right? For if you want to define markets and you want to define market power. So this kind of information is not out there. It's very hard to get. And the only paper that that I could find, the serious paper, is by somebody who in the first footnote said that he was paid by Google. Okay, so that it was funded by Google. And again, there are questions like with regard to rankings and all kinds of algorithms. How do consumers actually react? Do consumers actually look for more options? Or do they stay with the first choice? How many of them do that? How frequently do they do that? Under which conditions? All these are really important questions that should be part of the analysis of consumer authorities. So I'm actually calling here for the firms with data to share it. And if antitrust authorities can get the data, I think that's for the better.
So, you know, one thing about the FTC, and I say this in a good way as praise, it has really created a third leg for the stool in the privacy area, and it's done it out of a broad interpretation of its powers under Section 5, and it's become the de facto regulator of privacy at the federal level, where we have no such explicit mandate, except in some very, very specialized areas, and that's awesome, and it's expanded and changed the nature of the expertise. In answer to your question, I want to do a quick empirical poll of the audience. How many people, and you can answer more than once depending on your training, how many people have legal training in the room? How many people have an advanced graduate degree in economics? How many people have any principal training in data science or information science? Great. I hope that number is really much greater in the next iteration of this, because we're in new territory, and you know, as I think the agencies are going to have to find a way to incorporate that kind of expertise. And my guess is 5 or 10 years from now, there will be more such people than economists, and economists will continue to play an important role. But this is the area that I think is going to change the way all agencies are eventually going to approach these areas.
We have time for